Shabbat Shalom.
Good Tag. Shavua Tov. Shabbos is over. I don't know what's going on with you, but good Shabbos if that's what the situation is.
No, you don't get it. I want to be the first to wish you Shabbat Shalom for next week.
Oh, for next week. Oh, okay. Wow. All right. What a hot dog doctor. All right. That's what we like.
Dragon slaying fans, if you're out there, I'm joined once again by my cousin, compatriot, Michael Dallen. Michael is an author of a wonderful book, The Rainbow Covenant. Hope you can see that. Check it out. It's a beautiful treatment of the Torah and the Noetic Rainbow Covenant. And if you wish to support this, check out our book, Dragon Slaying, which is about recovery from trauma. Should you wish to sponsor us, please write us in care of drtom.author@gmail.com. Okay, Michael, so how's the past week been treating you?
It's been an interesting week. I have some medical procedures scheduled, and I'm scheduled to go to India for a wonderful Rhodes Scholar trip around Purim, around the darkest end of winter in Michigan. And we'll go to Delhi and Mumbai and Agra and back to the Taj Mahal. So that should be pretty nice.
Well, I hope you can return without paying an exorbitant tariff.
Right. Yeah, I hope. Yeah, we'll see how the Indians feel about those tariffs.
Okay. So you're going to be going around December, is that right?
Around?
When are you leaving?
Around Purim, late February.
Oh, okay. So we have time.
We have a minute. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what other trips are scheduled in between there, but life continues. And meantime, we're having extremely hot weather here for us, 90-degree days, and it hardly goes down below 80 at night. So this is, somebody in Texas or Florida would think that was a mere bagatelle, that was nothing. But here it's pretty debilitating. But we all have air conditioning, and we cope. And air conditioning is cheaper than it's ever been, thank God.
So those of you who are watching me, I know you're probably here to witness how bizarre my sense of humor can get. So I'm reflecting on a story several years ago regarding Michigan heat. I had the occasion of returning to my alma mater, the University of Michigan, to celebrate my daughter Rachel's graduation from medical school. And I was in a car rental line sometime around, I believe, June 3rd. And the car rental line was very busy. And there was a gentleman in front of me waiting. And he said something like, "Oh my God, I never anticipated it to be this busy this time of year." And I said, well, one of the reasons may be that the Wings are in the playoff. And he said, "What are the Wings?" And of course, all the fans standing there, anchored to the Detroit Wings for their lifetime, turned toward him with a most hostile glare. And I decided to save the day by waving my finger in the air like this. And I said, wait, there may be another possibility. And people turned to me to rescue this poor gentleman. I said, it could be that we're celebrating the only day of spring.
The only day. Well, you've escaped to Reno, Nevada, so I don't know. You're not exactly committed to this climate, I know, but we do all right, and we're forging ahead.
So I'd like to talk to you about a phenomenon that has puzzled me. And there are a number of very prominent Jewish politicians, Gottlieb, Shapiro, and others, who seem to have found great sympathy for the cause of Hamas. Help me understand that, Michael.
Well, that's just nuts. Hamas is an extremely evil organization that even the never to be adequately damned Arab League and its 22 countries have condemned. I mean, the rapists and monsters. The idea, I think, is that they feel an affinity to those who oppose what they regard as Jewish colonialism, and that Israel is an evil venture and it needs to be put down, and they don't regard it as a legitimate expression of Judaism or anything holy. I mean, this movement that's called for in the Torah that we should redeem this land, that we should develop an exemplary society in this tiny little land the size of New Jersey, including all the occupied territories. We talked before about Cicero going on about how the God of the Jews must be just a very meager, minor God if all he could provide for his people was a land the size of the land of Israel. There's a Jersey-sized area. It's not much compared to Rome. But people don't regard Jewish sovereignty or a Jewish polity as being a legitimate expression of Judaism. And I think it's important to remember what Judaism is, which is this world historical, religious, political, social freedom movement, a revolutionary movement that goes back to when the cement on the pyramids was still moist, that has been a football kicked around and mangled and interpreted and frequently hated and deplored and frequently admired. There are a lot of different ways of looking at Torah. I'll tell you, I mean, going a little off the track, but I hope you'll allow it. I was studying Torah with a buddy of mine, my regular chavrusa, my study partner, Tuesday, and he's quite a scholar, brilliant guy, and he was going on about there are all these rabbis who really don't want a return to the temple worship, to the sacrificial cult, to anything that would involve them getting out from their studies and getting their hands dirty by sacrificing, a heifer or anything like that. Well, they pray for that, but they don't really mean it. So they've taken that part of the Torah and decided that they have a better idea. We also have all these other people who have the idea that the way to bring redemption for the Jewish people and for the world, and remember, I mean, the Jews feel that our obligation is to try to bring heaven to earth, to make the world a real garden. We don't believe that the world is going to end in ashes. We believe the world is going to end as a fruited garden, where, the millennium, a good time. A lot of people have that desire, but they have the desire to do it through the cancellation of aspects of Torah. Let me tell you about the father of the Reform movement, which is really Jacob Frank, who lived about the time of George Washington he claimed to be the reincarnation of Shabbat Tzvi, the false messiah in Turkey, who came up in 1666. The Jews in the world were all impressed with that number, and that this would be the time that the new Messiah, the Messiahship has a lot of different qualities. There's Mashiach or Messiah ben David. There's Mashiach ben Yosef, a political Messiah, a spiritual Messiah. But he was going to be all in one. And he claimed to be the false Messiah. Jews literally sold their houses at fire sale prices to escape to the land of Israel, because that was going to be the thing, because the new Messiah. Excuse me.
Was he on the scam? Did he buy low?
Did he what?
Buy low.
Buy low. No. He seemed to believe what he was saying until the Turkish Sultan, grabbed his subject and promised to kill him unless he converted to Islam, which he promptly did, to the dismay of his followers. But at least he kept breathing, and he was pensioned by the Sultan. But the Jews were devastated. This was a big blow in 1666. So, and he eventually died. And then along came Jacob Frank, an Eastern European Jewish old clothes dealer, who claimed that he was the incarnation of Shabbat Tzvi, the false Messiah. And then also he was an incarnation of an aspect of God, that he was divine. And he had a new teaching, and that was the antinomian, anti-law teaching. The Torah says that redemption will come, the Messiah will come, when all of Israel keeps the Sabbath for 2 weeks in a row, or alternately, when all of Israel violates the Sabbath for 2 weeks in a row. And it was determined that it'd be a lot easier to get everybody to just blow it off, because that's the nature of the human race. So, and they worked at that. So Shabbat Tzvi started this movement that attracted these brilliant people from all over Europe, thinking that this echo of Shabbat Tzvi was going to bring world redemption. And it brought they practiced wife swapping. They did it. They tried to. It reminded me when I went to a private school for a while, a prep school. I set out to violate every rule in the rule book that they gave me. I deliberately checked off the rules that I'd broken until I pretty much broken everything except those things that involved capital felonies. And that's what they tried to do. So these people in Europe.
Talk about, Michael, knowing you and your integrity, you did not violate the honor code.
No, not the honor code. No cheating. No. Okay. But you weren't supposed to stand on a certain thing. You weren't supposed to stand on one little place that was supposedly holy to the school. I did worse than stand on it. And what they did, though, I'm going to mention some names that are just preposterous, but Mendelssohn, Schiff, these people they found this doctrine just compelling. They would go up to visit Jacob Frank, where sometimes the bishop, he was almost always in prison, but when he was in prison, he would normally run the prison. He just bribed the guards, and they did everything that he asked, and he lived this royal life in these different prisons. And they would go up to God's house, they called it, and they would visit, and there'd be wife swapping and all kinds of.
Okay, what country was this?
This is the East. It was the German lands, including Austria, including Germany. But he had to travel a lot, being, the nature of what he was doing. So he got in trouble with the Tsar. The Russian Orthodox prelates decided that he was a flim-flam man, and they were about to lynch him when he told them that his daughter, Elena, was actually the illegitimate daughter of the Tsar. That her real name was Romanov, and they couldn't kill a Romanov, so they kept that going. To this day, people still have the idea. It was just an invention from whole cloth. But this, believe it or not, was the start of the Reform movement, and it had a lot of money because the Schiffs and the Mendelssohns and these other famous names, these families that became famous, were Jews who had their energies released. They no longer had to eat kosher food. They no longer had to keep the Sabbath or the holidays at all. They thought they were doing well by violating these things. So they could hire and fire clergy. And what they did was make an amalgam of Jacob Frank's antinomianism and Jean-Jacques Rousseau's philosophy. They coincided. And they came up with a very liberal set of doctrines, some of which, have a great deal to do with the liberation of the world. They believed in certain aspects of the Torah, the liberal poor laws, the color blindness of the laws of Torah. They liked what we'd call progressivism. They liked women's liberation. Rousseau was famous for saying, "Man was born free, but everywhere he is in chains." And they set out to destroy the chains. The Schiffs were big believers in the destruction of slavery, and they got behind the North in the Civil War, and the bond issues that the North came up with were subscribed largely through the sales efforts of the Schiffs.
Time out. Just
yes, sir.
Case in point, Jacob H. Schiff was actually the subject of my confirmation speech.
What? He was a great man. What was it? What did you say?
I recited his biography, okay?
Okay.
And the importance he was to progressive causes and his philanthropy and so on.
Well, he was an inheritor of these doctrines that were in many ways wonderfully liberating. But they were also antinomian. They also wanted to wean the Jews from what they regarded as a superstitious reliance on like Torah precepts, like keeping the Sabbath or not eating unclean foods.
Just on a personal level, as you know, perhaps coincident to the influence of my mother.
It did.
Yeah. Jimmy and I were raised in a Reform tradition.
Yes.
But you were raised in an Orthodox tradition. Is that true?
No. My mom wasn't nuts about Orthodoxy either.
Okay.
Conservative, but not Reform.
But you came to that later.
I did.
You came to that later.
Yeah, 19 or so, when I became convinced that there was truth there. Reform, I thought it was Judaism light, but it's really not. It's an alternative to Judaism. It started out as this movement to get away from all of these things. The leader of Reform in the 20th century was Maurice Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionism, and he had a big influence on conservatism. He was the 20-year head of the Jewish Theological Seminary, its main intellectual fortress, But even more, he had an effect on Reconstructionism, which, in his words, doesn't believe in God in any conventional sense, and Reform was a branch, really, of that, of um, um, this antinomian idea. They believed in God, but this was a very weird God who was reached through contrary means. You would please God by the idea was that you would please God by fulfilling the admonition of Isaiah to release the chains, to feed the hungry. And that was the essence of their religion. In a lot of ways, it was really very decent. And it had a lot to do with freeing slaves. It had a lot to do with freeing women. It had a lot to do with color blindness in the laws. And they had a lot of fervor. They also, but they got rid of the idea of a return of the Jews to the land of Israel, because that seemed to me them to be just parochial. They thought that they were going to have a world-beating religion that everyone would come to. Um, the stories are just wild. They came to America and thrived, much more so than Orthodoxy. These German Jews, they were prosperous, and Reform had taken over in much of Germany, and they had what was called the famous Trefa lunch at their center, the Jewish Theological Seminary in Cincinnati, involving Maryland baked ham and oysters, and it because that's what they believed. They really believed in these things, and it was a test for people. If you couldn't eat that stuff, you weren't really with the program. Somebody has done a study of the descendants of those people who were at that breakfast, who subscribed to, this effort, and none of them left Jewish descendants. Because without those things that they disdained, the Sabbath, the kashrus, um, and the belief in a God who gives you directions that he means you to keep, they didn't remain Jews. They became Episcopalians. Look at the masthead of the old New York Times, the Oaks and the Salzburgers, and they all fell prey to that. And now there's not a single Jew owning the New York Times.
Back up a bit, just to go full circle. So your argument is that Zionism and Reform Judaism began to split. That idea is no longer central to Reform Judaism. I am curious, however, since I have regularly attended and maybe even presided over Passover Seders, the last words of the Seder is next year in Jerusalem. Is that still recited in Reform congregations?
Yeah, they don't mean it.
Okay.
No. They mean, when they say Jerusalem, I remember my uncle would go. He would go next year in Jerusalem as a tourist. He'd say, as a visitor. That was all he wanted. And he had grown up Orthodox, but that was sincerely all he wanted. But it was the movement itself that we had when Zionism as a political force came to America in the 20s and the 30s. Reform staunchly repudiated it, but Orthodoxy largely repudiated it too, because they had what was called the Haredi apostasy, the idea that the land of Israel was too holy for mere modern Jews to traipse upon, that we would violate Shabbos while we were there, and then the results would be just catastrophic. So they wanted to be called by the Messiah. They wanted redemption to come from on high, and not through human means.
Michael, for a moment, could you comment on something that I think is an issue that I've observed over the past, say, maybe 60 years, and that is that the concept of God is no longer essential to many religions. There were, as you're probably aware, in Northwest Detroit, there was a very vital congregation that was led by a rabbi that disavowed the existence of God. There are certain Christian denominations that don't invoke God. In fact, I have a story of a delightful, wonderful African-American patient that I had treated, and she was quite distressed. And I asked her about it. And she said, well, my husband and I have joined this new congregation, and the minister is very articulate, but it troubled me that he never invoked the name of God during his sermons. And this past week, I approached him and I said, Doctor, can you tell me why it is that you avoid invoking the name of God? And his response was, I am concerned it might offend someone.
Well, a lot of people think that God is an antiquated concept. That a lovely friend of mine, a great fighter for justice, was arguing with me and insisting God is a figment. You're attached to a figment, and they really can't imagine God. And the whole point of God is that he can't be imagined. I have a book here. Allow me to put it up to the camera. It's Walter Lippmann was a great sage of yesteryear.
Right.
And this is a dense book, a preface to morals. And he goes on about people not being capable of religious belief unless they have a God that they can imagine. And that it is the true religion of people to have an imaginable God, a tangible God. But that's preposterous. And Judaism has always insisted that God is not imaginable, that there is no image that you can trace. Real, a personality, as realer than real, vital as tomorrow, but not imaginable. In the Torah portion we were just reading over Shabbos, Moses insists, you saw no image. There was no image. There is nothing to imagine. This is beyond a lot of people's capability, it seems, of grasping. They need something to imagine. And if there's nothing to imagine, they think there's nothing there. And good old Walter Lippmann comes up with a whole new religion. In the course of half of his book is devoted to explaining why religion is failing in America. And this is in the 20s and the 30s, in the 20s. And then he provides a solution, which is a new religion that is godless. And his argument is, and that's the only way for an intelligent person to operate, because who can believe in a God?
Recall a month ago that you and I had a dispute when I referred to God and the Noetic covenants, or for that matter, the Ten Commandments, as an organizing myth around our society as constructed.
Right.
And you said it was a lie. And I said, no, it cannot be disproven. We have to function on faith that myth is guiding us. That is, it is alive very much as a functional myth. That is, we don't know what it is, but it is a myth, just like it can't be proven. The other question I have for you on a personal level is, and I remarked to you, I think, previously that when you read some of the passages in the Bible, particularly the Psalms of David, you almost have a sense of an ongoing dialogue between God and David. What has happened to that dialogue today?
People have conversations with God. If you remember in Fiddler on the Roof and Tevye's wonderful conversations with the King of the Universe?
Do you have such conversations? Good. Okay.
Yeah. No, he's real. I mean, I don't regard it as myth. I regard the Greek baloney. I was publishing African myths about Shango and some of the African pagan gods, and or you look at I was just in the Far East recently, and you look at these gods and demons that are around Buddhism, and and if the real religion of Thailand and these other Far Eastern countries isn't actually Buddhism. It's these horrible demon-ridden gods and goddesses, mostly Hindu. Um, the 8-armed gods with demons and Shiva and the destroyers. Very very populated pantheon. You think they're just gentle Buddhist philosophers, and they worship these other things. But I wouldn't use the word myth. That was what got us going. But it is an intellectual structure, and and a core of stories. I was thinking, I was reading Martin Marty. I think he was a Catholic theologian, a very popular writer. And he wrote a piece because of the stories. And why was he a Catholic? Because of the good stories, because they don't really believe in the physicality of the Christian God or the Holy Family. All these Jewish people, Anne and Mary and Joseph and the rest of them, the brothers. That isn't it. But they like the stories, and the stories are a way to get them up and to get them to appreciate the ultimate, the God force, who is some kind of amalgam of different intellectual forces, spiritual and cosmological. It's not Hashem, but it's something like the God of Israel. It's something like the God that we know by the name of the Tetragrammaton, the Y, H, V, and H of, that's pronounced Lord. In Hebrew we say Adonai, my God, which is not his name. The name has something to do with the Y, the H, and the Tetragrammaton. But we believe behind all that, those are just letters. Behind all that, there's a real, actual, living, realer than real being who is the God of Abraham. I remember it was a client of mine. I was sitting next to these people who were anti-Zionist, and they were Reconstructionists, and they said to me, I can't imagine any educated person could believe in that God of Moses anymore. And a good client of mine who was raised in poverty and the Depression, and he raised Catholic, but he become a Bible reader, and good old Jim. It was like, man, that doesn't sound much like the God of Abraham. And it's not. We still believe in the God of Abraham, the God who loved Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and had a relationship with them, and had a very close relationship with them. And that we seek that kind of closeness and that relationship ourselves, individually and collectively as a people. And that's why we do these things, follow the commandments that are designed to bring us closer to him and get our minds. We do these prayers to get ourselves thinking as he wants us, as our sages told us, he wants us to think, to feel great gratitude. I mean, and I know your psychiatrists and psychologists have often, if I may say, preached on the value of showing gratitude. That is a very human, important thing for a human soul, to have a sense of gratitude, living life as we do, getting our food, getting our necessaries provided, and that a proper response is one of gratitude. So we institutionalize that and make it part of the daily, and hopefully get our minds into that framework where we can have, if not a prophetic relationship with the King of the universe, the ultimate reality, Hashem himself, the God of Abraham, but at least satisfy him and comply with his wishes. We believe in what's called hashgacha pratis, which is divine influence in small things. Like, I remember I had a goblet, and I had a Thai Buddhist lady who wanted that goblet, and I knew she wanted that goblet to make offerings, oblations to her gods. And my other half, my lady love, was about to give it to her, and I stopped it, and she was ticked, and I wouldn't let her have it. And my lady love and I, or later, we're driving, and I go, well, look here, we're getting a parking place. We'd never get a decent parking place again if you'd given up that goblet for avodah zorah, for idolatry. And so, but we believe in this. Yeah, I remember I was talking about my lady love's brother, who is, we'll call him a dipsomaniac, and he ended up at the VA with all kinds of trouble, and we didn't know what. We were speculating, and I remember saying, his name is Kenny, and I remember saying, if Kenny's liver is okay, there is no God. But you see what I'm getting at with that there needs to be a God if the universe is going to work okay. If a universe with no God is a universe where Kenny's liver is okay, and and the grass is black and the skies are red. You need God to make things work and ensure justice. So, but there has been this movement that is post-God. Reform Reconstructionism feel, mostly that he is really not attainable, that the prayers are old hat, and the idea of returning to Israel is something they're not nuts about. We believe that it involves the redemption of Israel and ultimately of all mankind. Reform feels, and Reconstructionism too, feels it's just a place where the Jewish people live, and if they're going to defend it, they're going to defend it because it's like defending the Bronx or Crown Heights in Brooklyn. It's just a place where Jews live, without any further spiritual significance.
There's only one short step, I believe, between the denial of the existence of God, or if you will, the rejection of that organizing myth, and just hedonism, that everything is okay and there's no consequence to anything. Which means that
Kenny's liver is okay,
Yes,
makes absolutely no. What kind of world is,
We have a world of chaos. Well,
Yes.
this is not, obviously, we're not going to finish this dialogue this evening, but you have triggered all sorts of curiosity on my part. The closing message, though, is that your God is a personal God. Your God is a God of consequence. Your God is a God where the rules make a difference, and you attempt to live by those rules.
Absolutely.
And you would argue that we as humans would live better, more cooperatively, more lovingly, if we could follow these rules.
If we recognize that this God is real, and if we had respect for him, Linda, my late love, used to say that, they're trying to tug on the Almighty's winky, that they're trying to buffalo God. They're going to do something that's just going to play at worship and belief, and hope he just misses that it's not real, just playing with the Almighty's winky. And people do that, and they, he is disrespected in a zillion ways. One of the precepts of the 7 Noahide laws that I wrote about is you don't defame God. You don't do things that drive him down in the estimation of your fellow human beings or in your own estimation. And people do that kind of thing all the time. As they're, they'll kick the blind man while giving charity, to something that would make their names better, as though he won't notice that they've kicked the blind man. It's a defamation. The idea is that God is a fool and he can be easily tricked, and and that's not the system. That isn't what reality is, and we know a few things about it, and it isn't just myth. You look at the world and you ask, is this all an accident, or did a intelligent living being create it? And if you decide that he created it, if it's just an accident, then, as you say, kind of everything goes. I don't know what the point is. You can say that, we're dealing as well as we can with in a possible situation where nothing really matters, where you die and that's it. There's no justice except what you make, to challenge. I know very moral atheists, and but there's another system, and that's where he provides the morals, and you do what pleases him, and you stay away from what displeases him. And what pleases him are decency, rectitude, kindness, mercy, chesed, going out of your way to help your fellow being, and preventing cruelty to animals, because he cares about as you learn from the Sheva mitzvahs, the Noahide commandments. He really cares about the pain of animals and his human creations given dominion over the planet, not causing them unnecessary pain. He's a very good God, and not the jerk, who can be misled by people playing at trying to charm him.
Well, Michael, thank you so much. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate your wisdom. I feel that every time I talk to you, I learn an enormous amount, and I admire your extraordinary soul energy. I do hope I can talk to you next week, and I think our audience will look forward to your next wise perspective on what's going on in this world.
It's always a pleasure, Doctor.
Okay. Until next week, I hope you will join us, and I hope you all are healthy and enjoy your summer and hydrate. It's hot out there.
Hydrate. Right.
Hydrate.
I will. Okay.
Be well.
Be well.